Welcome to QUARANLEAN, the show where we bring a little lean ensemble into your homes while we all wait for the moment when we can once again do it in the theater. I'm Blake White, and this is episode 8 of the online talk show, and it's time for the first ever QUARANLEAN audience poll question. The question this week is, during a Zoom meeting, I am most likely to A, pay attention to the content of the conversation, B, look at people's backgrounds so I can see what their houses look like, or C, stare at my own face. Now, I choose not to answer this question at this particular time. Does anybody else remember the halcyon days of 6 months ago when we thought the biggest controversies of 2020 would be the bizarre acceptance speeches by Joaquin Phoenix and Megxit? Well, here we are approaching the end of August, and the global pandemic rages on while the country continues to struggle with difficult conversations about race. And we still haven't gotten to the presidential election yet. As public gatherings have been canceled due to COVID-19, many nonprofits, including Lean, have taken this pause as an opportunity for a little self-reflection so that we can emerge from this pandemic as more inclusive and focused and diverse organizations. Due to the historic nature of these dual crises, I couldn't be happier to be talking to this episode's guest. Not only is he an expert on civil rights and social justice, he has built a 20-plus year career working in the nonprofit sector. Currently, he's the executive director of one of Hilton Head's most important cultural destinations, the Mitchellville Freedom Park. I am so delighted to be talking to Ahmad Ward. Ahmad Ward, thank you so much for being with us, dressed impeccably as always. Every time I see you, I feel a bit like a hobo, but I'm also always impressed. Thanks for being with us today.
Appreciate it.
I think we can agree that the past 5 months are historic in nature for a couple of reasons, right? We've got this worldwide pandemic that has pretty much put the entire planet on a pause. And we've also had, since late May, a racial uprising that has been going on in the United States. I want to first talk about what you've been doing at Mitchellville and your role as executive director, and how Mitchellville as a nonprofit, because this pandemic has hit nonprofits as hard as any other organization in the country. What has Mitchellville been doing to try and innovate and think through this problem and also stay at the forefront of the community?
Well, number one, Blake, thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it. When it comes to Mitchellville, which of course is the first self-governed town of formerly enslaved people in the United States, established on Hilton Head Island in 1862, quarantine has given us some new skills. The pandemic, I got to say that there's a silver lining for us in this, even with the slow nature of our process here and our progress, is that we've been very quick on our feet and have had to adapt to this new situation because, we have a park and most of our programming is happening in the park, and our park was shut down for about 3 months. So the pivot to digital really gave us some more scope. And so what we're doing in this is, I think, advancing ourselves in some ways. And it's enabled us to really take a hard look at how we were going about our business. And so we're in a position now where we've done a lot of programming online through our Facebook Lives and some other things, where we're reaching new people. And now the time is right to go out there and really push this project and start the silent phase of a capital campaign at some point. It's silent, so I'm not talking about when it's going to start, right? But we'll be able to get things going.
So let's talk about the other thing that's been going on this summer. And I've been lucky enough to hear you speak. I've been lucky enough to be in a room where we were having conversations and to speak with you privately. You came here from the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, correct? And that was 3 years ago? You were the director of education
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when I heard you speak at the Rally for Change back in June, you, in your speech, which really, really, really resonated with me, you said that this work begins at home. Explain to us what you really mean by that. It begins at home.
Well, your circle is where you do the most work. Like, I think when people talk about race, well, number one, people get scared to talk about race because of obvious reasons, right? But the work to try to dismantle the impact of racism, classism, things of this nature, begins in your circle. And so what I meant by saying the word begins at home, and what most people mean when it says, yeah, you got to start at your house first, is there is this knee-jerk reaction to try to bring in people of color to fix those kind of things instead of you learning and fix the people that are around you. Because you can go to all the rallies, all the marches, you can wear t-shirts and put the things in your Instagram and your Twitter banners, Black Lives Matter, all that stuff. But if you got an uncle, your grandfather is saying crazy words, your father, your nephew, your sister, they are being inconvenient in their speech and the way they look at people. Are you really being an ally? Like, you have to start at the house. Part of that is if you have children, if you have people that you have influence over, you're explaining to them how everybody should be respected the same way. And then even though there's differences, that we have to value all of those differences. That's where the work begins. The work begins, if you want to change the impact of racism, you got to start where you live and do that work, so then it becomes a ripple effect. That's the only way you're going to have grand sweeping change and see it around you. Like, you have to be a part of that, and you can't do that if you're being quiet.
You also said, and this is something that will stick with me for a long time, you said, don't tell me how to bleed.
Yeah.
When I have arguments with my wife, whom I adore, oftentimes the fights that we are having are from a general lack of understanding of the other person's pain, however large or however small it may be. And we just want to say, well, why don't you just don't tell me how to bleed, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's this very common through line, but in this context, incredibly magnified. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what you were trying to say that day?
Right. And what we tell people is you can't tell injured people how to bleed. And there's an injury. Like, you have to keep that in mind. There's an injury that was not self-inflicted. So you can't either be a part of the injury or watch the injury happen and not intervene and then say, oh, you can't bleed here. You don't bleed like that. And what it means is you can't tell people who are hurt how they show it, how they protest, how they express themselves. And so, like, it can't work to your comfort level. All right. We're talking about a centuries-long injury, and your comfort level cannot even come remotely close to the impact of that injury. Right. So it's like, bump your comfort level. Like, your comfort level is inconsequential to people who are hurt. And that's where the Black, brown, Jewish, LGBTQ, Hispanic, Latino, doesn't matter. People say get over slavery, right? And so, I used to talk about slavery. Never mind, people still talk about the Civil War, have reenactments, all that stuff, and praise Confederate flags, things of that nature, but don't talk about slavery, right? Do you understand that every single time I write my last name, it is a nod to slavery? Because my last name is the person who owned my ancestors. Every time I sign my name, that is a nod to slavery's impact. And when you think about it in that way, like, oh yeah, you can't really escape it, right? It's there. You can see it in the discrepancies of how people live, of how they work and play. Like, there's long-ranging impacts, and that bled over into Jim Crow, which took up most of the 20th century. Like we had like the civil rights movement was just 54 to 68. Well, there's Jim Crow took up the rest of that time before then. We haven't had a real conversation about cause and effect and why these things happen. And that's why you still talk about it. And so for us to see this awakening, I kind of chuckle at it, you know.
You said it's comical. You said this like,
it is.
Like me, kind of make you giggle a little bit. Like, oh, what?
Not you, like you're right. But but it's funny that
the car on the way home after the meeting.
Yeah, people have this thing where they're like, oh my gosh, this is happening, and people of color, Black people, are like, yeah, I've been saying this is happening for 30 years.
One of the reasons I have the job that I have is because I am fully immersed and in love with the art of creating theater. I think that it is a powerful tool. I think it is a diverting tool, and I think it is a relevant tool. And when it works, when it happens, and we do more shows than the ones that work, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But when it works, there is no greater euphoria than I feel, especially as a professional. When you do the kind of work that you do, which is mired in difficult conversation and teaching the same lesson over and over and over again, while also raising money, while also working with the board of directors, while also dealing with government, while also dealing with something I've never had any experience with, which is like park permits and things like that. What is the moment that gives Ahmad Ward joy to say this right here is why I do what I do?
I think it's when you can see young people make a determination that they're going to stand up for somebody who's different from them, or have an aha moment where it's like, okay, I understand what you're saying. Like that, because I am a pseudo educator. Okay, I've been I'm not classically trained educator. Okay, but I've worked in education for 20 years in some form or fashion. You know, I got the experience, right? I do this, so I still consider myself in some ways an educator. And so to see people get it is one of those things. I'm like, you understand, or just somebody, you know what? I didn't think about it until you said it. Now I got it. Cool. You know, those kind of things are good points for me. You know. And sharing information and make sure people understand where they're coming from. And we can even agree to disagree. But if we can do it respectfully, like, you know what, I don't agree with all your points, but I understand where you're coming from.
I don't know if you've heard, we've got this project where we've commissioned a play called Mitchellville.
It may come across my desk at some point.
It did come across your desk. That is funny for several reasons. If nothing else, it's going to grant me the opportunity to keep talking to you for the next couple of years. And I am super stoked about that. And thank you for giving me some time this afternoon. Thank you for being an honest and just brutally fantastic member of our community. And I'm glad to get to know you a little bit better today. So thanks for getting here.
Thanks for asking me to do this, and look forward to working with you on that project.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you. Well, that's it for this episode of QUARANLEAN. I want to thank our guest, Ahmad Ward, as well as our production sponsor for this episode, Yoshihana Renovations, right here on Hilton Head Island. Gratitude and thanks, as always, to our producer, Erica Kramer, over at Sleeves Up Productions. My apologies for running out of time to Tony Award winner and Emmy Award nominee, Kenny Leone. We'll see you again in 2 weeks, everybody. And until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay sane.